Hi, I'm Whitney Espich, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the MIT Forum for Equity. I am Ebony Hearn, class of 2001, course 10, Chemical Engineering. I currently serve as the Executive Director of the MIT Office of Engineering Outreach Programs, and I will moderate today's discussion. Today's broadcast is sponsored in part by the MIT Federal Credit Union, MIT Professional Education, and the MIT Hand Heart Community Innovation Fund. We welcome your questions and input during this discussion. A reminder that conversations on equity are often difficult, and we all benefit from active listening and respectful dialogue. For those joining us via Zoom, please use the Q&A feature found on your toolbar and use the chat for any other discussion. We will get to as many questions as we can today. We're here to discuss the challenges facing engineering schools as they seek to implement or better understand and approach change around equity, inclusion, and belonging. I'd like us to begin this conversation with similar definitions for equity, inclusion, and belonging. Quickly, I think many of us strive to make our campuses and organizations more diverse and inclusive of individuals from different backgrounds and perspectives. And when we are working towards and designing for inclusion within our organizations, then we are designing policies, processes, physical spaces, products, etc., to ensure that members of our community or organization feel valued, feel included, and feel that they belong. When we are also working towards equity, we are acknowledging our differences while also acknowledging that everyone has different needs, experiences, and access to opportunities. Many people conflate equality and equity. Today, we want to make sure that when we are talking about equity, we are talking about the fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all people, while at the same time striving to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented the full participation of some groups. There are a lot of great cartoons and memes on the internet that demonstrate the differences between equity, equality, and justice. I encourage you all, if you're a bit unsure, to check them out. And I'm so excited to hear from our leaders today. Joining us are three MIT alums from highly respected engineering schools in the US. We have with us Dr. Chris Rose, class of 79, SM 81, PhD 85, currently professor of engineering and associate provost for STEM initiatives at Brown University. We have Dr. Alicia Sarang Saminsky, 98, associate dean, professor of engineering, Olin College. And we have Dr. Justin Swartz, PhD 90, dean of engineering, the Pennsylvania State University, excuse me. We'll post the link to their full bios in the chat now. To start, I'd like to ask each of you to give us a glimpse into the work you are involved in at your respective institutions in terms of equity and inclusion. And I want you to offer a reflection on how this past year's events have changed the way you have approached changing the climate within your schools. Welcome, panelists, and we'll start with Chris.
Okay, so I guess I'm the ancient one, the dinosaur in this crew. So I have a long view and history of this. So I'd like to share some slides, if that's the appropriate point here. And I will do that. And those of you who are watching will recognize just how dinosaur this is, because you'll see I use a Linux laptop. And let's see if I can go to full screen here. Poof. Can everybody see everything? Are we good? Okay, I see head shaking, but not voices, so this is great. So my take on the whole equity and inclusion thing from an institutional standpoint is that faculty are forever. And if you want to change an institution at its core, you really want to diversify the faculty. And that's the fundamental precept that I've been working with. And Ebony already gave the introduction. I'm a professor of engineering, so I'm a practitioner, I'll put it that way. And then I got sucked into what looks like kind of admin, and I've avoided that all my life. But in this particular case, it was a very useful thing to do because I'm able to sculpt at a high level something that I think everybody will benefit from. So as I said, faculty are forever, and that's something that I think we all know. And here's the thing. Faculty, first off, we don't work well under supervision. We just don't. That's the way we are. And you've heard the expression herding cats. Well, we are the ultimate cats. And the thing is, we think we're really good at hiring people and recognizing talent, and that our networks are perfect and everything like that. But the bottom line is that without any sort of action, we will replicate ourselves. And there's no evil in this. We go with what we know. We all do this. So part of it is opening up the network and being amenable to change. So the other thing that I've seen over my long time, I graduated for the last time in '85, and started kind of the academic thing thereafter, is that if you try to diversify a faculty and you hire in individuals into disparate little places, often, everything is a social enterprise, and that's what people don't realize. We think that we're technologists and that there's science and math, and you just put that around it and everything will work. But these are social enterprises. So diversity without some sort of cohesion and community is unstable. People come, people go, and nothing actually changes. The other thing is that there's always in the back of the mind, I know that I'm an affirmative action baby. I was admitted to a prep school in New York in 1968. That was a similar time to now, as Ebony talked about, where there was all sorts of national foment. So you want to, essentially, we came to play. Everybody that comes into these situations, an MIT, an elite school, we didn't come there just to survive. We came to walk that carpet with the king in Stockholm, even if we're engineers. So that's my motivation and my background. So what to do about this? Well, it turns out that, at least from my perspective, everything was laid out for me. What is that book? If you just do everything you learned in kindergarten, life will be great. We learned this in our youth. What you need is an instigator or a trailblazer. And many of you will recognize Shirley Jackson. She is one of my progenitors. I call her that. She was an instigator, gadfly, trailblazer. And she was at the right place, the right person at the right time to start MIT off, along with Paul Gray, who was a young professor at the time, in the right sorts of directions. And there were other people, but I'm pointing to Shirley because she's just such a force of nature. So what we had back there in the day, 1975, it wasn't the 1968, 1969 class. 1975 is in the belly of the beast. So there was a bunch of undergraduates. There's a picture of somebody that you may or may not know. Here's a picture of somebody that you may or may not know as well, Jim Gates. A lot of you were trained by him in the interface program. There's Jenny Patrick, she was a postdoc, and then there is Wes Harris, who I personally call Mufasa. He he stood over us, protected us, and there was this conduit, there was this continuum from undergraduate through faculty. And it was kind of magical at the time, even with all the various things that were going on. And if we could just replicate that, that would be great. Now, the problem was in the mid 80s, it kind of fell apart. I didn't know what graduate school was as an undergraduate. And then suddenly, there was Jim and Jenny and all these other people. And I realized that, oh my goodness, I could do this forever. And that, that made me very happy. And then in the mid 80s, the wheels fell off it for a variety of reasons. Jim talked about it. He did one of these before. So for me, the dream is about critical mass, community. And here's the other thing. A recent study out of Stanford, I think it was this past summer, showed that STEM PhDs from underrepresented minorities are more creative. And they did a word search and they looked at it, and I could give you the link, but I don't have it right here. So if you want it, I'll give it to Ebony and she'll send it around. And to me, that leads to breakthroughs. And that's what this is all about. Why did we even come here other than to do things and make breakthroughs? The thing, though, is that once you set up this sort of thing, you have a competitive advantage as an institution. And that's really the crux of what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to blaze through. I've already flapped my lips a lot. It's an occupational hazard being a professor. So I'll blaze through the rest of this. But this is, if you don't remember anything from the rest of this, I want you to remember this particular slide. Community, creativity, breakthroughs. All right, so building the dream at Brown. I'll talk about Brown. So I tried to sell this at a number of different places, and for a variety of reasons, it didn't work at other places, and Brown just bid it whole hog. So almost as soon as I got here, we put together this thing called the Diversity and Inclusion Action Plan, $185 million for diversity and inclusion. So the administration provides resources, departments provide plans, and then there's administrative oversight and accountability, and that's a key. So here are I'll give you the ingredients that you really need. You have to have administrative will at the top. So we have an amazing president and provost. Now, you know, the joy of being a professor is I could say all sorts of horrible things about them. I'll still have a job. So I really do mean it, that they are really fantastic. They are nothing like what I've ever seen. And they come on the heels of Ruth Simmons, who was president before, first Black woman, I believe, in the Ivies. Here's another thing that's not as obvious. You need somebody in place that really understands how race and ethnicity work in America. And I got lucky that that's my sister. She's a public intellectual, big deal, like Cornel West, you know, out on that scene. So anytime that things go wrong or things I don't understand, I can go talk to Tricia and she can explain it and articulate it in ways that produce actionable items. And then this is actually important and really important. You need an architect. You need somebody that can flow between departments, talk the technical talk, try to sculpt initiatives. And that's me. A long time ago, but you know, that's me. So let me give you a program palette sampler. There's a whole bunch of things going on at Brown around these issues, but the things that I'm responsible for, one of them is the Provost Visiting Professor Program. And since this is an MIT crowd, you'll appreciate that I also call it the Inertia Program. What you do is you invite really smart people in and bring them in for a year, just like the Martin Luther King Jr. Faculty Fellowship at MIT. The difference is that it's explicitly a recruitment program. And the cool thing is that if you get somebody here, inertia sometimes takes over. So that was the way that we lured Jim Gates here, who could not be removed from UMD, but now he's here in the physics department. And Ron Aubert, who was making big bucks in the pharmaceutical industry, and we kind of convinced him to come here too. And we worked on John and Carlos, but you know, that didn't quite work. The other thing that I run, and I'm very pleased about this slide usually takes 500 minutes to load, is this presidential colloquium series. And the idea here is to really bring heavyweights in who are aspirational. It's not only to show students and you know, people that are learning that things are wonderful. You really want to show the faculty that there's some tremendous talent out there that they want to be like themselves. So you'll recognize Paula Hammond, who is a rough contemporary of mine. She's chair of chemical engineering at MIT, and Jim Gates. All right, so now it's going to take forever to load. This is the slide that takes forever to load. So the other thing that, and this is something that is so incredibly important. Again, we came to play. That's what we do. That's what we're doing. We came to play. So I want to try to engender here at Brown and elsewhere high impact ensemble brilliance. And that means technical stuff across boundaries. So I call it, we call it STEM jazz. And, you know, that's a very hackneyed and true engineering picture of what I think STEM jazz is about. And that's another thing. That's another part of the program. And then the big thing is the Target Opportunity Program. My aegis is all of STEM at Brown. So I'm trying to hire faculty in all STEM areas, knit them together. I have some number of lines per year that I can use. We work with the departments. I may suggest folks, departments suggest folks. We work together. Brown is a very collegial place with very low boundaries. And then the other key is careful archival vetting, even before you decide that somebody's going to be on a short or a long list. Okay, so the dream progress. What have we done? When I got here in 2014, this is the faculty who were here. These were the minority faculty, URM, and this is not exhaustive. I didn't, I didn't try to be exhaustive. And this is where we are now. And I want to point out, down here, where if you can see my little hand mouse, these are not tenure track positions, but all of the rest are tenure track positions. And here's the key. Each and every person on this list knows each other. I make it a point. We get together, we talk science. And from that, some crazy stuff starts to happen. So this is STEM jazz, you can read that. I'm running out of time or have run out of time already. But the idea is that you can get some crazy work. And again, we came to play. We're here to go to the academies. We're here to talk to the king in Stockholm. That's what this is about. And that's what I hope will happen here. Now the breakthroughs, it's early yet, but there's some really interesting things that are happening that I'm not going to talk about here. So the Dream Reprise, you got critical mass, community, creativity, that leads to breakthroughs. But here's the point. If you do this STEM jazz sort of thing, I believe it will confer a selective advantage in the evolutionary sense. And that's what's going to lead to institutional change. So with that, I'll stop and unshare. And thank you so much for allowing me to flap my lips so long.
Wow, I really want to just dive into conversation, but I'm going to totally switch gears and share what came out when I tried to think about answering the prompt, which is a slightly different story, but one that is so much newer to the world as Olin is. So I'm coming from Olin College, and as I'm guessing people know, but also people might not know, we were founded only in 1997 to sort of change engineering education. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of a wending story that I think will get us to the point of today's panel. So we graduated our first class in 2006. It's all undergraduate. It's all engineering. It is teeny by teeny standards. Like I talk to people from small colleges and they're like, no, you're really small. So we're really small, which has some really interesting advantages and challenges. So from a changing engineering education, bold vision, new college perspective, we've accomplished a lot of things. We built a curriculum that is focused on a real different set of things than engineering education was 20 years ago. And with a real focus on human-centered design, a lot of the professional skills that people were looking for, but not teaching in engineering colleges. And we were able, as a teeny sort of upstart, to be part of the contribution to those big changes. And the way that we do this, and this is sort of the key I want to come back to towards the end, is not that we invented any wheels. We just had the opportunity as a place that was very agile and able to sort of be very mission driven across the board, to compile the most, what I always call it, the most concentrated collection of best pedagogical practices around that were drawn on emergent practices. And we have a real focus on sharing that with a larger community and understanding scaling. And I think that's sort of one of the really great advantages of being a teeny, young, agile place where there's a very large amount of alignment. We also learned some things. This is sort of my story of Olin's history. I often talk about the funny intersection that happens with engineering culture, with sort of meritocracy and objectivity, being a teeny little place and being very mission driven. And one of the things that we learned from that is that it leads to this sort of we're all one big happy family feeling. And that has some great advantages in terms of working together. It also has this really homogenizing effect. And for folks of color, it has a whitewashing effect. We also focused a lot on gender balance in a very binary sort of notion of gender early on. And there were people who were like, oh, we'll have some representation and it's gonna fix things. I suspect if you're on this call, you might laugh at that. And we realized it didn't. And that sort of gets at the need to think about systems, much larger systems, and how we're interrupting them. And one of the other things we've learned is that in the face of that sort of whitewashing effect, that we really needed to get a critical mass of Black and Latinx students, as well as staff and faculty, in order for people to have that community that they need. So obviously we have been working on things. We've moved through adolescence. We're at least in early adulthood and possibly, sort of moving into adulthood as an institution. And for a long time, we were doing a lot of very small scale DEI efforts in pockets here and there. But I think the exciting moment for me right now is that the entire community, faculty, staff, students have all been looking for something bigger. And so we have had this awesome opportunity recently. We were searching for our second ever president, and there was a big community input in the process. And the one message that came across louder than anything else was that we wanted a leader who would prioritize equity and inclusion from the top, because we know that's so critical. And wow, the committee delivered. So in July, President Gilda Barbino, who is a longtime advocate worker, just amazing, all around amazing, joined us as our president. And so that has really allowed us to think about just radically changing how we're approaching this work. And so she is starting, obviously she started in the middle of a pandemic. And so we haven't been able to get together as much as we would like. But she's really laid out her strategic vision where access and equity are sort of a core piece of what we're doing to continue doing transformational education, and also thinking about sustainability of business models, especially for small academic institutions. And at the center of that is sort of trying to continue to leverage our focus on experimentation and co-creation, that sort of the things we already know how to do well. And so this is a very early stage conversation and we've laid out some values and we're really thinking about how to implement that. And, you know, Chris was talking about sort of coming to play, like in some ways we're sort of showing up to play early, a little late to the game. And I think there's some exciting opportunities for us to think about how to contribute to reduce inequity, both within and through engineering education. And so the reason I'm sort of excited to be in this particular institution right now personally is that this is sort of the equity and access moment in engineering education. If I think back to 20 years ago when we're like, we should really start thinking about including these other skills like teaming and open-ended problem solving, there was a moment, and I think we were able to leverage that as a community. We know a lot about what doesn't work in trying to implement DEI practices, and we're starting to know some things. You know, you were talking about some things that are working. And so I'm excited because right now we actually have prioritization of equity and access at all levels, and this sort of small, agile institution ability to make change. And one of the things I was thinking about that allows us to do that is faculty work in DEI and staff and student work is rewarded at this sort of promotion and reappointment level. And it's not seen as something that's extra or penalized. And I think that's something that's incredibly important as we think about how to incentivize this work. And so I'm excited to imagine how we can join this conversation and use our strengths to advance it.
So good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you happen to be. It's great to be here. I was really excited about this invitation because I think equity is the greatest challenge we face in engineering education and in many ways in engineering period today. I'm not quite as experienced a number of years as Chris, but I'm pretty close. And I would say, you know, we've been talking about this since I was an undergraduate. And while I would say we've made some progress in gender, but not nearly enough, we've made an embarrassingly small amount of progress in terms of racial issues. So let me go to my next slide. Yeah, engineering equity at its core, you know, if there's one thing to take away from my perspective from this discussion, it's this fundamental challenge. How do we advance the idea that Black minds matter in a nation that doesn't agree that Black lives matter, right? Why are we having conversations about the latter while at the same time we're fighting to advance the former? Now, thinking about, you know, and some of my comments are going to echo what Chris and Alicia already said. You know, faculty, staff, grad students, undergrad students, we in universities are really a mutually dependent ecosystem. And, you know, so do our equity and inclusion efforts reflect this interdependence? I think that's an important thing for us to think about. I think another, for me, lesson from 30 years of failure is that equity requires progress in culture and demographics. And if we aim at one without the other, we're going to continue to fail. And I also like to point out, you know, we're engineers. What we do day in and day out is apply known science to solve societal problems. For decades, there has been a growth of known social science related to equity and inclusion. Yet we as a discipline have really failed to translate that to practice. And that's really what we need to do, is apply what we know how to do, take known science and apply it to practice to make real change. So a quote that those of us at Penn State love to share often, mainly because it came from Gordon Gee, who was then the president of Ohio State, which is like Harvard and Caltech both praising MIT. But Gordon referred to Penn State as being a university that's elite, but not elitist. And when you think about that phrase, you know, we are proud to be not elitist at Penn State. We are a land grant university, as is MIT, though I don't know how many MIT know that. But elite has historically a word that's been defined by the elite, right? And traditionally what that means is wealthy, white, male-dominated mindset. And so I think in academia, we also need to start by, and in the engineering profession both, we need to think about how we view ourselves, how others view us, and how we actually are. Our fundamental responsibility is to graduate engineers who are most ready to contribute to the engineering profession and compete in the engineering workforce. That's what all of our engineering colleges are trying to do. more than ever before, I believe this requires far more than just technical knowledge. There is great technical education at almost every engineering college across the country. So how do we go beyond that? And I think it struck me just in preparing for this. One of the reasons I love doing these things is they make me think about the way we think. So many universities across the country want to be viewed as elite, right? But maybe what we need to think about is, why do our elite universities not think about wanting to be seen as not elitist, right? Being elite is not synonymous with being excellent, right? And so we need to think about whether the concept of being elite is somehow sending out a message of exclusion. And we should be talking about how we are a land grant, MIT is a land grant, but I think we're in an era where more universities should think like a land grant, even if they're not. And my friends at Drexel do that, for example. So it's not just the land grants that do. The quote here at the bottom is speaking really to that land grant mission and being of cultural value. And so I think that's, to me, is a big part of the equation, is how we view ourselves. At Penn State, we are at the opposite end of the spectrum of size compared to Olin. We, as a university, have about 100,000 students. In my college, we have, depending on how you count, which sounds like a funny thing to say, anywhere between 10 and 13,000 students. I say that because we have 24 campuses across the state. And so I have about 10,000 students here on my campus today, but I have a few thousand more, which is the more diverse group, honestly, who are not yet officially in my college, but if they go through entrance to major, they will then be physically coming here for their last 2 years. We have created a lot of initiatives in the last few years, and this is a summary of them. I think one of the questions that the opening question from Ebony included the question, how have things changed in the last year? I think from my perspective, we started on this in our college in a deep way 3.5 years ago, I think, when I came. The thing that's really changed in the last year, I would argue, is there is a window of opportunity here to make substantive change in the country. We have, I think back to Dr. King's comment that the ultimate tragedy, make sure I get the quote right, is not the oppression and cruelty of the bad people, but the silence over that by the good people. And I think what's changed in the last year is we have one of these windows where the good people are less silent, and where there is an openness from what I would call I call them sort of the racism agnostics, to recognize that, wow, maybe these chants from Black Lives Matter for the last year are right? And maybe we do need substantive dialogue and real change in this country. My university president has always been very open and progressive in terms of addressing things, but is taking it another step here at Penn State. So we have launched, I've got this long list here. Don't worry, I'm not going to read all of them. I do want to comment on a few. So we have transformed our faculty search processes once, and have had huge impact in terms of gender hiring, in terms of Latinx hiring, and have made embarrassingly little progress in hiring Black faculty, to be honest. We have started through what we call the Big 10 plus Deans Group, which is the Big 10 engineering deans, plus MIT, Carnegie Mellon, Berkeley, Texas, Georgia Tech, and apologies to others. We have begun a discussion about how the deans of engineering can propagate out the idea of infusing engineering education with equity, right? And by infusing, and by propagating out, we are reaching out to deans of other colleges, but more importantly, we're reaching out to ASEE and to ABET. And we're trying to start the conversation with ABET of, should we infuse equity as part of the expected engineering curriculum, right? And this is a window in time where I think we can get audience to that. Some of the other ones I'll just give quick examples to. One of our fundamental changes that I made in my first year was creating a new position, an associate dean for equity and inclusion. Essentially the college level parallel, I think, of Chris's position for his university. And one of the mandates I put into this was that it had to be someone who was, a highly respected engineering faculty, scholar, researcher, teacher, who was also extremely educated and able to lead in a major equity and inclusion process. And so we did a national search, and we were ecstatic to get Professor Tanya Peoples to join us from Iowa, a chemical engineer. And she's been, working now, day in and day out on these issues. Once she got settled, we transitioned our scholarship awarding to her office. And she created a system where we went from a sort of by the numbers, we're big. We have, like I said, over 8,000 undergrads on campus in our college right now. So when we make a change, it's hard to pilot or do it small. Yet she took this on, and we went from a sort of by the numbers, GPA, SAT kind of mode for awarding scholarships to asking students to do an additional application with essays. We had over 1,800 applications, each with multiple essays evaluated last year alone. And the goal here was not to say, let's find a way to build a system to get more women and more Black and more Latinx students. It was, let's build a system that's more robustly focused on equity, right? And taking a holistic view at our students so that we get the students who bring, the full package of experiences to our college. And with that, we expect there to be a significant change in our demographics also. In 1 year, we went from a 16% yield of students offered scholarships to over 40%. So taking a holistic view really does have significant impact. We are now, and by we, I mean Tanya is leading this effort, but we are developing a college-wide equity action plan. And the mission that I gave Tanya and the group that's building this was that it had to focus on equity, but it had to also focus on action. And that sustainable cultural change, which Chris pointed to, very clearly in his words, was that cultural change in academia really requires the faculty, and I would say the staff also in a school of our scale. And so I'm asking them to build an equity action plan that addresses culture and demographics harmoniously. And to think about equity action, as engineers, it's a systems problem. And so many of our things are interdependent, right? To do recruitment well and not do retention well is a waste of time, right? To focus on retention, if you're not going to recruit, who are you retaining? Advancement, we think about, faculty, not just keeping them here, right? But seeing them into the NAE, right? How do we address issues of service load? And a really important piece, how do we do assessment? And so in addition to this big task during a pandemic, and the thing that also was important here is that in a big university, top down doesn't get very far, right? So this is top initiated, but what Tanya is doing is building a team of faculty across our college to participate in this discussion and have lengthy conversations about how to do this, right? This needs to be accepted by the faculty, not just given to the faculty. At the same time, and I don't say in parallel, we are revising our promotion and tenure criteria from scratch. They haven't been changed in over 20 years. And to Chris's point about it's all about the faculty in terms of permanence, to make a sustainable change in an academic culture, we have to address the promotion and tenure criteria. And so we are splitting the 3 topics into expectations with a focus on impact, and then evidence or assessment. And I use words carefully that are not measure, because it's not numerical, but a holistic approach to evidence that is informed by the fact that we know there is bias in so many of the ways that we assess people. And we need to build a system that's robustly, I won't say immune to bias, but recognizes it and tries to be as immune to bias as we can, so that our assessment of our faculty really has a underpinning of equity built into it. So we have a faculty working on promotion tenure criteria, we have faculty working on equity action plan, and they are interacting frequently because the P&T criteria have to be heavily informed by the equity action plan. We'll also just brag for a minute. This last summer, as we were looking for things to do for our students in the pandemic, we actually created a diversity, equity, and inclusion micro-credential for our students. At present, this is internal only, but the conversation that we're having is, how do we launch this as a nationally available, internationally available micro-credential that anyone can take and participate in? So be on the lookout for advertisements for this down the road. But we understand that we have a responsibility. We have over 100,000 living alums in engineering from Penn State. We have a responsibility to their continuous education, but we also have a big responsibility to the engineering discipline and we are happy to take this on as a challenge. We also have expanded our, the programs that we have supporting our students. So the multicultural engineering program and women engineering program have been around for a long time at Penn State. But now you can see those were the seeds for a good dozen programs. I love the allyship program because this was actually launched by the MEP and WEP students, right? Where they identified people who they saw as strong allies and launched our first allyship event a couple of years ago. And I actually had faculty and department heads come to me and say, why wasn't I invited? And I said, well, maybe you need to think about that, was all I gave them. So with that, I will kick it over to discussion.
Excellent. Thank you all. Just really great to hear what is happening in your respective institutions. I spent a lot of time around these sorts of conversations and to see that, the action and the changes and the impact of that is really, really cool. And just such a great learning opportunity for all of us. So I want to make sure I remind our audience members that you can add questions to the Q&A. We love to hear from you all and get to some of your questions. And to kick it off, I want to start with a question. You all spoke to the role of leadership and faculty and playing a very significant role in building equity, inclusion, and a sense of belonging. So I kind of want to know, like, how have your universities gotten to this place where your leadership sees that it's important and that your faculty can get to a place where they don't see the DEI work as extra, as I heard also commented on. So I'd kind of love to hear, like, what, as you think about the role of leadership, how do we engage the leadership such that it doesn't feel like extra?
I'll take a quick stab if that's okay with everybody else. Alicia, you're muted just in case you know, because I definitely want to hear. So one thing, before even starting that, this was actually wonderful. And I have to confess to a bias. In technical talks, I always know when somebody's from MIT. There's a clarity, there's a story arc, there's just a way of doing things. And damn, that's all I have to say. Thank you, Alicia and Justin. Yeah, right. That apparently is a Brown thing. I didn't know, but I'm too old to do it. But specifically there, I think that you have to sell the value proposition and the leadership has to believe it. Justin is clearly somebody who does, and he may not know it, but I'm now looking really hard at him. And, he'll be getting calls. So Penn needs to watch out because this is what I do. But the point there is that you have to have leadership and it has to be at the top. And, and by the way, the president is one thing, but the president has to manipulate and massage the corporation. It's a whole ecosystem of things, that we were talking about. Now, what's unique about, I won't say what's unique, things are cyclic. I lived through, I was a kid during the '68 riots. I was a young professor in the classroom, in the pit, when Rodney King's people who beat him were acquitted. And, we've all lived through this now. So these things are cyclic. And I think that what is also needed, once you have the leadership in place, and what the institution has to do is recognize the times and kind of tap into, and Justin said this, tap into that feeling of hope and forward motion. Now, it may not take you all the way, but it'll get you started at least. Now at Brown, specifically at Brown, it was easier because this isn't, since I've been to Bell Labs and as a student at MIT, this was the flattest place in terms of ease of interoperability, talking to each other. It's non-hierarchical, strangely so. And that includes the administration. So that's something, but you can't build that. Different places are different, but it really does start with the leadership and the value proposition. As Justin did the wrap up, you have to, in order to change the climate, you got to get the faculty going, and to get them going, they got to see something in it for them. It's really intellectual economics, in my estimation. So sorry to flap on so long, and you can always shut me up, Chris. Chris, be quiet is perfectly acceptable.
Alicia, why don't you go next, and then I'll make some comments after you.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the reasons I threw in the idea of kind of rewarded and not extra is that that's something, it's certainly something I hear from folks, especially folks who hold on majority identities. Like it's always the folks of color and the women and the LGBTQ folks who are doing the diversity work. And it seems like most reward systems are like, yes, we're going to count your papers and your grants. And then if you want to do that extra thing over there, that's cool. And so I think a lot about the reward system, and we also went through a redesign for our promotion and reappointment system like 10-ish years ago. And it's really focused on developing students, building and sustaining the college, and external impact. And so using those broad criteria, if I'm doing this work, this is part of my external impact. And developing students is about developing all students. And I think the other piece is that I think getting faculty into the mindset that this is the work of engineering education, to understand how to make sure that all students, belong and are included in the classroom, all colleagues belong and are included. Like, it's not separate from the other work. And I think that's what's exciting. It's sort of exciting about what's going on for us right now, is that people are all there.
Yeah, and so I'll just add for our university or my college, because of our scale, that whole issue of getting the faculty involved and not seeing it as the responsibility of the underrepresented and women faculty, that's absolutely an essential challenge. I have the second challenge of, I think my leadership team is half the size of Olin's faculty in engineering, right? And so, and so I have the need to, sometimes I communicate through the leadership team, sometimes directly to the faculty. And I try to have a couple of mindsets. One is sort of a lead, follow, or get out of the way. And that's not just for leadership, but for everyone. If I don't have 350 faculty all working towards equity, I can accept that as long as I don't have any working against it. And there's different levels of engagement across the faculty. The other thing I try to push people to do is, instead of just questioning the outcome, I tell them question the assumptions, because it's usually the underlying assumption that's the problem, right? That's the whole idea with elite versus elitist. So when a department head comes to me and she has a candidate that, is really strong in terms of their equity action during as a grad student and postdoc, and she doesn't know how the faculty are going to respond to that piece of this person's CV, I sort of take the same language that you hear in other contexts, and I say, well, how are your other faculty candidates going to even compete with this person, right? Why is that not the structural advantage for that person, rather than sort of how they're viewed, right? And so, I push the idea of credit is very important for faculty. And so, yes, making sure that participating in these efforts is recognized. For my college of my scale, that means the department heads have to recognize and appreciate the value of it. And so so it's complicated, and it's from the leadership perspective, that's part of the work. And so one thing I do as an example, right, we have this PowerPoint I just presented. I shared that yesterday with my leadership team, just said, hey, this is what I'm going to talk about tomorrow. Because and I got 3 responses all pointing out a typo. They all found the same typo. But the point of sending it wasn't just, here's what the dean's going to talk about. It's because I want to beat the drum that this is important, right? Saying it once, this is important, doesn't mean it's important. But talking about it in different ways and showing how I'm spending my time on it in a way that they wouldn't otherwise see was really the message of sending that out. And it gives them the backing to spend your time on this too. This is a core value.
Thank you all. So there are a lot of wonderful questions here, and there are some folks who've actually upvoted a few questions. So in the interest of time, I'm hoping that we could have just maybe one person answer the question if you feel, and then maybe we can get into a second, but I'd like to be able to get to as many of these as possible. So I want to start with a question from Sandra. What metrics do you use to track progress and truly understand what aspects of programs are working and which may not be as helpful? Chris, you mentioned a couple of different programs. So it'd be great to hear from you.
For me, you know, there are the programs like Thinking Out Loud, which was the presidential colloquium, and we measure success by how many people show up, and those have been packed university-wide. The other thing is a slide that I shared. How many faculty are here? Are they producing grants? Are they working together? So for me, it's really, really clear if something's working and if it's not. So I think that answers the question, but you know, maybe not. And it's rarefied. I'm talking specifically about gathering faculty together and getting them to work together.
Others who might have a different response? Justin? No? Okay, excellent. I'm going to the next question here. Carlos, from Carlos, is there a push to include DEI efforts in faculty grants and proposals and university support for those efforts? And, you know, Chris, this kind of aligns with something you just said, but if our other panelists might want to add to that. Is there a push to include DEI efforts in faculty grants proposals and university support for those efforts?
So I would say the number one thing we push in faculty grant proposals, frankly, is to respond to the solicitation, because the only reason you write a grant proposal is to get funded. So that means the answer to this question varies from agency to agency quite a bit. And there are federal agencies that are less interested and federal agencies that are very interested. So it's a huge topic for National Science Foundation. It's called Broader Impacts. It falls under Broader Impacts. And the bigger the sort of the grant as you go to you know, big centers and the multi-year center proposals, it becomes even bigger. And you know, it's probably an area where universities have been supported because they saw NSF valuing it. But I think there's also, you know, those who have been valuing it as an intrinsic value, you know, are way ahead and have, you know, see some benefit to it that's, you know, tangible, if, you know, if not motivated by the social cause, but simply by the pragmatic. So we do try to support it, you know, historically, but I think right now in a much bigger way.
Thank you. Another question here from Joan. How do you and your colleagues think about the rural, semi-rural, and urban differences? And in some ways, your campuses are all in sort of different types of communities as well. So it actually might be interesting to hear a little bit from each of you regarding this question.
I don't mind going first because we have campuses. You know, 95% of all Pennsylvanians live within 30 miles of Penn State because we have campuses across the state. And we are described by the media as being, you know, Philadelphia in the east, Pittsburgh in the west, and Alabama in the middle. And so, you know, when I talk about the community here in State College, you know, I tell our candidates, look, I've yet to meet someone, you know, a Black or Latin Amish, and we are in Amish country. So it's a huge issue. But it also is part of why, when we talk about equity, we are thinking about Black and Latinx, but we're thinking beyond that. We're over 30% first in family to school, you know, to college. And we have a lot of, you know, lower income students from all demographics. And so we think about not just the traditional equity spaces that are so prevalent, but we think about how do we make sure that all of our students are getting that same appreciation for the value of a diverse team? Because that the white kid from the farm, right, who may have never seen an underrepresented person before in their life in person, it's a new experience for them too, right? And university life is new for them also. And I think if we do this right, they begin to see that they may actually have more in common with the first in family Black student than they do from the multi-generational, you know, in college white student that they may look like. And so it's you know, identity is complex. And I think that to me is really the fundamental piece is, you know, we have 8,000 different students.
I think I mentioned sort of the homogenizing effect of being such a small community, and it's the same thing as sort of trying to build awareness of not assuming things about socioeconomic background or sort of previous exposure to college through family. And we think about that a lot, we are only in a suburban, very white location. And so we think about that both in terms of students and also recruiting staff and faculty, and how to sort of mitigate the location both. I mean, we are relatively close to Boston, which I think helps. And so we try to make sure there are opportunities for folks to get into this, for students to get into the city and think about how to improve transportation, because we're also not very public transportation accessible. But I think it is a major challenge to sort of recruiting a broader set of people, because it doesn't necessarily feel like home.
And we're in Providence, which is about as crunchy as you can get. So, I have nothing to add to this because we just don't have that sort of experience. But the faculty, the faculty they've already been homogenized, to use Alicia's expression, by their training. So it hasn't come up, the rural versus urban issue, at least on the faculty front.
From Keandra, how can alumni assist your equity efforts? What helps impress university leadership and faculty that press upon that equity is important to and demanded by alumni? So what, in all of this work that you all have shared, what's the role of alumni in pushing these efforts forward?
I think Alicia and Justin should, since I don't do advancement, but I know where they're going to go. So I'm going to give it to them.
I can jump in quickly to say that our alumni are very active, and they have been demanding and basically forcing the creation of additional funds that they want to give to for diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And so that's, one way is that they are pushing on it. And the other is that many of them have gone on to do this work in their professional lives, especially in the sort of private space or industrial space. And so we're starting to partner with them and have them come back and contribute to the conversation as sort of guests in various ways. And so there's, I think, you have a lot of voice as alumni, push on that.
Yeah, so I actually had this conversation with my Engineering Alumni Society leadership Monday, I think it was, or maybe last Friday. Penn State is known accurately as having extremely engaged and enthusiastic alums. And that's a real blessing in this case. And so, what I tell them is, because what the alums love to do, even more than donate resources, is donate time to spend with students. And I tell them that the number one thing they can really do to help me with equity is to continue to articulate the importance of equity in the workplace to our students. Because hearing from a faculty member in the ivory tower about how important equity is, you consider the source, right? And given our demographic and how many of our students come from communities that just have no experience in this, but when they hear someone who's a vice president at Lockheed Martin talk about why Lockheed Martin understands the value of equity, or a leadership position at Bechtel, or the CFO of Amazon is a Penn State engineering alum, and he talks about their challenges in hiring diverse technical staff. So I tell the alums, tell the students that this is important, because they'll believe you, right? And you tell them that this is a professional development aspect as well as a social justice aspect, and they're going to hear it, and it'll actually sink in more deeply. So, having that 360 advocacy is really important.
Let me put a cherry on top of that. One thing that advancement, so in generating funds, so Justin and Alicia, I know you're all over this in your roles. There's this misapprehension that if it's to, let's say, increase the number of Black faculty or students or Latinx or whatever, that only the associated group will give money. And that is completely insane. But I'm telling you, it's entrenched within the advancement community. They'll go to particular people. So one thing that you can do to help is educate folks, form coalitions, give money, give time, and everything else that Alicia and Justin just said.
Thank you. Another question. We have time for a few more questions, hopefully. So A big problem come from Fred. A big problem continues to be what used to be called the leaky pipeline. Any comments on getting more underrepresented students into the STEM PhD pipeline? Related, there is the issue of young PhDs not feeling welcome in their fields and changing careers even after earning their PhDs. So we can speak a little bit to that.
I'm going to jump quickly over that and shut me up. So when I took this job 5 years ago, I also wanted to have a graduate school component and a postdoctoral component. And I have the postdoctoral component, but not the graduate school because of the way Brown is structured. So that was to kind of correct and help the pipeline. But here's the thing. Remember I talked about 1968, Shirley and all of them? That was the first time that, and I'll speak specifically about Black students. It was also Latinx, and we were hugger-mugger back then. Everybody, huddled together for warmth. But there are issues, about our preparation. Well, we did really well, despite the seeming lack of preparation. So this leaky pipeline stuff really annoys me, is the point. You shouldn't be selecting based on skills. You should be selecting based on talent and capability. And that's what happened. And I can give you another story about the 8 Black women in my class and what it might say, how an unenlightened person would look at the admissions problem there. But then you look at the achievement that 5 of them just were off chart, and you begin to realize that there's a systemic issue. So I think there is a pipeline issue, but I think at each level, you can't just throw it back and say, oh, we can't hire faculty because there's nobody in the pipeline. Look at folks that have the talent, because you can develop the skills, and you can develop people are smart. You can develop the skills quickly. And I'd say that my generation and your generation, Ebony, you're a little bit younger, are proof of this, is the point. So I'll stop. Sorry to have gone on so long, but I'm passionate about that.
Do you want to go, Alicia?
Yeah.
So I'll say that, we think about the leaky pipeline, and the pipeline starts K-12 and goes all the way through the profession. So one of the reasons, I used to have my alums and industry who would hire from Penn State would come and tell me about the leaky pipeline they have in their company. And big companies would come and say, we hired, 100 engineers one year, 50 men, 50 women, and 10 years later, 50 men are still there and 10 women are still there. And even worse for Black or Latinx hires. And honestly, my first thought, that gut reaction was, well, you have a problem in your culture, which I never said, fortunately, because I started thinking about it and I said, with our scale, 2% of all engineers in the United States are Penn State alums. So if I'm going to graduate 20,000 engineers in the next decade, those 20,000 engineers are going into the engineering disciplines and are defining the future of engineering culture, right? So this is why, to me, it's so important that we address equity in engineering education at the undergraduate level ubiquitously, because my goal is that every student I graduate is the most qualified for whatever they want to do next. And that includes, every white male student. It's just important that I educate them as everybody else, technically and socially, so that, when a company hires my white men, they know they're getting someone who's going to improve their culture and help them with their leaky pipeline. Now, the question about PhD pipeline, one, we're competing with the industry that hires our bachelor's degree for PhD students. And so, there's always there's always tension in terms of limited human resources. The thing I think we can do the best, the biggest, the lowest hanging fruit for improving the PhD pipeline is significantly improving our 6-year graduation rate for undergraduates, right? So if all of the Black engineers that started as freshmen graduated at the same graduation rate as our college average, that would be a huge increase in the number of potential PhD students. And we've seen that transformation in women graduation rates, but we've not done what needs to be done for some of the other groups. And it's complicated, right? We love to blame K-12. We love to blame society, and they have responsibility and ownership too, but we can't just continue to blame and not be part of the solution.
There are still some phenomenal questions, but I know we are at the 1 o'clock hour. Just quickly to you all, are you able to stay just a moment longer? Maybe we can answer to, if you aren't, it's fine. Awesome. So from LaRouche, I've suggested discipline-specific DEI education at my institution, similar to what was described by the presenters. Who teaches those courses and modules at your institutions? And if STEM faculty members, how do you get them trained and confident enough to teach the historical and social aspects of D&I that they may not have seriously thought about before? And this is going to go to Justin specifically.
Sure. So I'm happy to say that we are still developing that. And, one question that we have because of our scale of Penn State is there is Penn State momentum to also build that into the curriculum. So we're actually, and if you want to send me an email privately, we'll make sure to get you on the list. We're planning to actually host a workshop probably this fall, national workshop on engineering equity education, right? To bring people who are already doing this together, to talk about if we can get this transformation in ABET, what does it look like practically? We want to make sure it's something that's doable at schools as small as Olin and as big as Penn State. And maybe it's done through another college providing the lectureship. Maybe it's done as part of engineering ethics. Maybe it's part of engineering design. Do we do it in first year? Do we put it throughout the curriculum as a part of capstone? There's all these implementation topics, and the goal of the workshop that we're hoping to host is really focused on, all right, how do we really implement this in a tactical way? So we'd love to have you engaged in that. Same, of course, to you, Chris and Alicia and others. But it's a challenge, and we do have, there are faculty who can really do it well, and other faculty who need the help, and that's why we're really trying to figure out what's the best way to infuse it ubiquitously.
Can I chime in a teeny bit on that? I think it's all yes and. So having people incorporate wherever they can throughout the curriculum in ways that they're able, but also to bring in folks who, get the training, as you said, but also to partner with folks who do have the training. Because, most of us weren't trained how to teach, let alone, actually think critically and look at sort of social justice within the history and context of engineering. So it's a pretty big lift. And we've sort of been grappling with that. We want total education integration, but we also want to have the humility that this is not necessarily our wheelhouse to talk about some of these things. And so I think, I do a lot of partnering with colleagues in student life, and especially our director of diversity, equity, and inclusion, to think about how we can work together to make sure that we're sort of both bringing everything that bringing all of our strengths together, but kind of like all the places. Yes.
And I'll do a quick yes and if that's okay, Ebony. You can shut me up. But I really admire the systematic and the structural things that Justin and Alicia talk about. Our provost and president are very much into that. I am myopic, however, and I think that the and part of that is if you show the value proposition. Now, this could be a Kevin Costner moment for those of you who are old enough to remember Field of Dreams, that movie. If you build it, they will come. But I think that if we can produce the fantastic scholarship that I know we can, underrepresented minorities have a history of doing amazing things with very little. So if we can produce that value proposition and then we have the machinery all in place for the education and moving everything around that Justin and Alicia talked about, that's something powerful. So I am myopic about those other things, but the systems level things, the institutional level things are just so important. So, I applaud you both for that.
Well, thank you all for your time this afternoon. Really appreciate your sharing your perspectives and experiences. I know there were more questions. We will be providing those questions to our speakers, and on behalf of the MIT Alumni Association, thank you all for tuning in to this Forum for Equity broadcast, and thanks to Professors Rose, Sarang Samiski, and Schwartz for volunteering their time to contribute to this discussion. We'll again forward all the questions asked via the Q&A to our speakers today. We will keep the chat actually open until about 1:15. A reminder that this broadcast will be available on the MIT Alumni Association YouTube channel within a week of today. If you have ideas for topics or speakers in the series or other feedback, please reach out to alumnilearn@mit.edu. Thank you all again. This has just been phenomenal, and I just really appreciate the great discussion.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.